Okay, guys, let's just jump right into it. I don't have my Apple Watch today. You usually, in my other videos, see me looking down to see if I'm in the frame. I don't know how in the frame I am, but I need to get better recording equipment, but here we are. Today, we are looking at How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And if you're like me, this is a book that you've heard a lot about, and so I just figured it was time to read it. It says on the cover, now over 15 million copies sold to date. And I know for a fact that this is an old edition. I don't know the year, but but more than 15 million copies. You can, let me see if I can find the date that it was printed. Is that somewhere on here? Who knows? 1981. Revised edition copyright. I don't know. That's not the print date. But, okay, this book. It literally is a book on how to win friends and influence people. If the title is not a clickbait, it's not a bait and switch. It really is. And so it's a lot of like principles on things that you can do to win friends and also influence people. So I feel like this one might be a little different because it is like different in the fact that like it's more just principles. So I'm going to be reading a lot of principles and just giving you my ideas on them. But the book is good. I would recommend this book to anyone. I think everybody can benefit from reading this book. I am not a huge self-help guy myself. I know people intimately that only read self-help books. It's all that they ever read. And to me, that's a little much. I feel like a lot of self-help books are they all kind of say the same thing. In a way, they all kind of do. This is actually, I think, my third self-help book of the year. I read The Four Agreements. I read How Will You Measure Your Life? And I think this is the third, but I'm not entirely sure. Which is a lot for me. I don't usually do that. And they all do kind of say the same thing. It's like, be a good person and like, be empathetic, smile, I don't know. And they all are kind of written similarly. Well, not The Four Agreements, just because it's kind of like more spiritual. And actually, this one does a pretty good job too. I just feel like sometimes it gets a little robotic with like, here's what you should do to like improve your life. Blah, 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 and blah. So anyway, the reason that this one is a little different though, it's actually in the introduction, it talks about how Dale wrote this. It says, Dale Carnegie wrote as he spoke. And so it is kind of like you're hearing somebody say these things. It's not as robotic as like others. So yeah, let's just go quickly over the contents and then I'll just dive right in. So, and just also a side note, this was copyrighted. This was first published in 1936. So a long time ago. And in it teaches these principles through talking about, anecdotes of famous people of the times. There's like Henry Ford is in there, and when all I can think of is Henry Ford. There's a lot of people of the time who are in here. Why am I drawing blanks? I know for they do talk about Abraham Lincoln a bit, even though that's not the same. He wasn't obviously around in 1936, but he was probably 60 years earlier. And sorry. So yes, the contents. The contents say, so this book is made up into 4 parts. The first part is fundamental techniques in handling people. Part 2 is 6 ways to make people like you. Part 3 is how to win people into your way of thinking. Part 4 is be a leader, how to change people without giving offense or arousing resentment. And then there's the closing of it. So let's just get right into it. If it does kind of sound like a bulleted list that I'm reading off, it kind of is. And so that's kind of what's going on here. How to Win Friends and Influence People. I'm now reading from the preface before we get into the meat. It says, How to Win Friends and Influence People was first published in 1937 in an edition of only 5,000 copies. So, but it has obviously gained popularity. We see that it has sold 14.99 million more copies since its first publication. And it says each generation has discovered it anew and has found it relevant. So do with that what you will. It says, this is in the part of the book that says how this book was written and why. It says 15% of one's financial success is due to one's technical knowledge, and about 85% is due to skill in human engineering, to personality, and the ability to lead people. So I don't know where those percentages came from, but I believe them. The great aim of education is not knowledge, but action. And this is an action book. That's a quote from Dale Carnegie and in 1937. So then he goes on and he starts talking about, and I do like how it flows. Each of the parts, it's broken up into 4 parts. Each part is made up of principles, and the principles that Dale Carnegie thinks are most important to accomplish that part. So part 1 is fundamental techniques in handling people, and he goes through and he gives principles that he believes are the most important in handling people. So let's read some of that, shall we? The next time we are tempted to admonish somebody, let's pull a $5 bill out of our pocket, look at Lincoln's picture on the bill, and ask, how would Lincoln handle this problem if he had it? You see, I told you Abraham Lincoln is mentioned in this, but anyway. The only thing that I would comment on this little excerpt is I haven't touched paper money in a long time. So I think we'd have to just imagine a $5 bill in our minds. The next one, Benjamin Franklin, tactless in his youth, became so diplomatic, so adroit at handling people that he was made American ambassador to France. The secret of his success? I will speak ill of no man, he said, and speak all the good I know of everybody. But it takes character and self-control to be understanding and forgiving. A great man shows his greatness by the way he treats little men. Wow. Wow, I highlighted that. I forgot how hard that hit, though. Instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out why they do what they do. God himself, sir, does not propose to judge man until the end of his days. Why should you and I? That's a quote from Dr. Johnson. And I'm sure there's only one Dr. Johnson out there. So, Sigmund Freud said that everything you and I do springs from 2 motives, the sex urge and the desire to be great. Which is interesting. Every man I meet is my superior in some way. In that I learn of him. Like, it's just a good book to, like, make you think about, like, your relationships and, like, I don't know. I've discovered from personal experience that one can win the attention and time and cooperation of even the most sought-after people by becoming genuinely interested in them. A person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. That makes me remember, and I wouldn't remember his name if he didn't remember mine after all these years. I'm sure he still remembers my name. I think it was like 7th grade, literally. I did a basketball camp, and there was this coach named Coach Alex, and it was literally just like a basketball camp of just a week, and there were so many kids, and he went through and he made sure he knew everybody's name. And so during the drills or whatever we were doing, he would call out names to people, and he would talk about how important people's names are if you're wanting to establish a connection with them. And so I still remember his name, even though his name is very hard to remember. Alex, Coach Alex. Yeah. People's names really are important. If you aspire to be a good conversationalist, be an attentive listener. To be interesting, be interested. Ask questions that other persons will enjoy answering. Encourage them to talk about themselves and their accomplishments. Which I really like that one. Because I feel like, especially today, so many people are so selfish with their, I don't know, like relationships don't need to be self-serving. And he actually talks about that. This is an anecdote he shares on page 129. I was waiting in line to register a letter in the post office at 33rd Street and 8th Avenue, New York. Blah, 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 blah. He sees someone. And he says, I certainly wish I had your head of hair. I'm assuming he is bald. He looked up, half startled, his face beaming with smiles. Well, it isn't as good as it used to be, he said modestly. Blah, blah, blah. I'll bet that person went out to lunch that day walking on air. I'll bet he went home that night and told his wife about it. I'll bet he looked in that mirror and said, it is a beautiful head of hair. I told the story once in public, and a man asked me afterwards, what did you want to get out of him? And I really like Dale Carnegie's writing. That's another good part of this. He says, what was I trying to get out of him? With 3 exclamation points. What was I trying to get out of him? 3 exclamation points. If we are so contentedly selfish that we cannot radiate a little happiness and pass on a bit of hope, honest appreciation without trying to get something out of the other person in return, if our souls are no bigger than sour crab apples, we will meet with the failure we so richly deserve. So, yeah, I am in a business school right now, and I'm studying accounting, and it does often feel like when we're talking about networking or, establishing connections, a lot of people think that just means it's like for a self-serving purpose. Like, I'm going to network because I know it will help my future career. And so this is blah, 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 blah. And then it just becomes so insincere. And I don't know. I have a lot of issues with that because I don't know. You shouldn't have to look at relationships as transactions. Make other people feel important and do it sincerely. You can measure the size of a person by what makes him or her angry. Sorry, I'm flipping the page. And then I'm going to read this last one first before. It says, praise the slightest improvement and praise every improvement. The last note that I have, and those are obviously only the principles that stuck out quite a bit to me. There was a lot more that I had underlined, but then I would just basically be reading you the book back verbatim. So I would recommend this book. I think it's a great book. And Dale Carnegie recommends that, you leave this book on your desk. It's always there as a reference. You can't just read it once and then forget about it because the principles, there are a lot of them, so they need to be revisited often. So that's his counsel, is to look back at this book often and try to find more within the principles, because more will stick out to you every time you read it. The one thing that I will say about this book, though, that kind of just my one irk, was that the problems that were presented in this book and the solutions were too simple. I think the thing that I wrote in here says, I feel like the solutions in this book are too instant, too magical, no questions asked. And because a lot of the stories that it tells, it's like there was this big thing at work and then I just decided to see it from his point of view and it resolved instantly and then this happened. Or there was somebody who was known to be just not nice and I decided to smile and then we became instant friends and blah, 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 blah. And I don't think that that's how problems and solutions in real life are handled. If it were to be like that, then everybody would be nice and would smile and then they'd get the instant gratification of having the people around them, having their issues resolved instantly. But that's not the case. and those people that do use people like in a transactional way. Like what were you trying to get out of that person? It's not like those people instantly meet that failure that Dale Carnegie was talking about. Quite a few successful people look at people like transactions and as dollar signs. So that's my one thing that I'd say about this, is that yes, the principles are amazing and the stories that are told are really good. And I love Dale Carnegie's way of writing, how it's very colloquial for the time and for him. I don't think problems are resolved that instantly if we employ good human behavior. So anyway, that is my review of How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. This might be one of our shorter episodes that we've had. I usually just ramble on and on and on and on and on. The next book that I am reviewing is Gone Girl. So that book was a trip. So come back next time. I know I've been kind of sporadic. School, it's finals week this week. So say a quick prayer for me that everything goes well. But during Christmas break, I'll definitely be making more and more consistently. And I want to do a year end. Like, so far this year, I've read 38 books. And so I want to just tell you like the top 5 or like the ones that stuck out to me and why. So come back to that, and I'll see you next time.